June 6, 1944, the day the tides of war turned forever. Imagine standing on the wind-swept coast of northern France before dawn. The sky is alive with the distant rumble of engines, the ocean churns under the weight of steel, and in the darkness, an armada unlike any the world had ever seen moves toward destiny. This was Operation Overlord, the largest amphibious invasion in human history, a moment that would decide the fate of Europe. In the early hours of that morning, nearly 7,000 ships and landing craft carried more than 150,000 Allied soldiers across the English Channel. Their destination 5 narrow beaches along the Normandy coastline, each given a code name that would soon be etched into history. Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The mission was clear yet unimaginably difficult: to breach Hitler's Atlantic Wall, establish a foothold in France, and begin the liberation of Western Europe from Nazi control. The operation had been in planning for months, under the leadership of General Dwight D. Eisenhower. Every detail had to be precise, from the tides and weather to the coordination of air, sea, and land forces. But nature and chaos have little respect for human plans. Bad weather had already delayed the assault by 24 hours, and as Allied commanders gave the final go ahead, waves battered the invasion fleet and clouds cloaked the sky. Still, the order stood. There would be no turning back. At midnight, Airborne Divisions began their descent behind enemy lines. Paratroopers from the American 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions, along with Britain's 6th Airborne, leapt into the blackness over occupied France. Their mission: seize bridges, block German reinforcements, and prepare the way for the seaborne assault that would begin at dawn. By first light, the horizon burned with gunfire. Allied warships unleashed thousands of shells toward German fortifications while waves of bombers streaked overhead. The invasion had begun in earnest. Across the beaches, men braced themselves for the fight of their lives, knowing that failure would not just mean death. It would mean the end of the dream to free Europe. Operation Overlord was not simply a military operation. It was a gamble of courage, strategy, and fate. One that would forever change the course of the Second World War. Before the sun rose over the English Channel, the American sectors of the invasion, Utah Beach, Pointe du Hoc, and Omaha Beach, stood waiting beneath the fog and thunder of war. Each of these names would come to symbolize both triumph and tragedy, courage and chaos, and the brutal reality of the fight to reclaim a continent. The first to strike were not those landing on the beaches, but the airborne troops who fell from the sky under cover of darkness. The 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions leapt from their C-47 aircraft into the night, scattered across the Cotentin Peninsula. Their mission was to seize bridges, disrupt German communications, and block reinforcements from reaching the coast. Confusion reigned as paratroopers landed miles off target, many in flooded fields, some under immediate fire. Yet, through sheer determination, they regrouped into improvised units and pressed toward their objectives. By dawn, they had captured key bridges at Lafayette and Chef du Pont, paving the way for the troops landing at Utah Beach. At first light, the invasion fleet appeared on the horizon like a floating city of steel. Utah Beach was assigned to the U.S. 4th Infantry Division, supported by the airborne men inland. Strong currents pushed the landing craft nearly 2 kilometers off course, but fortune favored them. The troops came ashore in a lightly defended sector, avoiding the worst of the German guns. By mid-morning, they had secured their exits and linked up with the 101st Airborne. The cost: 197 casualties, far fewer than planners feared. Utah was a success. Further east, at Pointe du Hoc, the 2nd Ranger Battalion faced one of the most daring missions of the entire invasion. Tasked with scaling 30-meter cliffs under fire to destroy German artillery threatening both American beaches, they launched their assault at dawn. Grappling hooks, ropes, and sheer willpower carried them upward through gunfire and falling rocks. When they reached the top, they discovered the guns had been moved, but a small patrol found and destroyed them in a nearby field. Their victory came at a heavy price. The Rangers held out for 2 days before relief arrived. Then came Omaha Beach, the bloodiest ground of D-Day. The terrain favored the defenders. Bluffs lined with machine guns and artillery, every approach covered. When the first waves hit the sand, chaos erupted. Many amphibious tanks sank before reaching shore. Entire companies were cut down before they could move. Yet amid the carnage, small groups of men pushed forward, scaled the cliffs, and took the German positions one by one. By nightfall, Omaha was theirs, but at the cost of over 4,000 American casualties. The American landings had succeeded, but their victory was paid for in blood, bravery, and endurance. As the morning of June 6, 1944 unfolded, the British sectors of Sword and Gold Beach became the stage for precision, resilience, and extraordinary sacrifice. Unlike the Americans, who faced chaos and confusion at dawn, the British troops of the 3rd and 50th Infantry Divisions were guided by meticulous planning. But even the best laid plans could not anticipate the storm of resistance that awaited them on the Norman coast. The easternmost assault, Sword Beach, was vital. Just 12 kilometers inland lay the city of Caen, a crucial road hub that controlled movement across Normandy. Capturing Caen on the first day was the British Army's top objective, a goal that would prove far more difficult than anyone imagined. Before the landings, British glider and parachute troops from the 6th Airborne Division descended into darkness. Their mission was to capture key bridges over the Caen Canal and the River Orne and silence the German guns at Merville Battery. Despite being scattered during their drop, the paratroopers fought ferociously, securing the bridges within minutes of landing. The Merville Battery too fell, though at a heavy cost. The eastern flank of the invasion was safe. At first light, waves of landing craft carrying the 3rd Infantry Division and the 1st Special Service Brigade approached Sword Beach. The German 716th Infantry Division defended the coastline with minefields, machine guns, and fortified strongpoints. The first British troops hit the sand under heavy fire, struggling to clear the obstacles and reach the beach exits. Tanks from the 13th, 18th Hussars followed, crushing defenses and creating narrow lanes through the chaos. Commandos under Lord Lovat fought their way inland, linking up with the 6th Airborne at the captured bridges in one of the most celebrated moments of D-Day. To the west, the 50th Infantry Division stormed Gold Beach, tasked with linking the American and Canadian sectors and seizing the town of Bayeux. Naval bombardment softened German defenses, but strongpoints at La Riviere and La Hamel still poured fire onto the beach. Specialized Hobart's funnies, tanks, flails, aviaries, and crocodile flamethrowers proved instrumental in breaking through. By evening, Gold Beach was secure, its defenders shattered, and the British had pushed farther inland than any other Allied force that day. Though Sword and Gold were both successes, Caen remained in German hands. The city would become the focus of some of the bloodiest fighting of the Normandy campaign. To the west of the British landings lay the Canadian sector, Juno Beach. This stretch of sand, running between the villages of Courceuls, Sur Mer and Saint Arbon, Sur Mer, would test the resolve of the men of the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division like no battle before. Their objective was to secure the beachhead, advance inland toward the Carpiquet Airfield, and link up with the British at Sword and Gold Beaches. But Juno, as it turned out, would be one of the deadliest places on D-Day. As dawn broke, rough seas battered the landing craft, delaying the assault by nearly half an hour. The churning waves swallowed many of the amphibious D.D. tanks that were meant to lead the attack, leaving the first waves of infantry dangerously exposed. When the Canadians finally approached shore, the Germans of the 716th Infantry Division were waiting, entrenched in concrete bunkers and fortified houses overlooking the beach. Heavy machine gun fire and 88 Bembuev cannons ripped through the first wave as ramps dropped. In some sectors, entire platoons were wiped out within minutes. Near Courcelles, the Royal Winnipeg Rifles and Regina Rifles fought their way across 200 meters of open sand under devastating fire. The Queen's Own Rifles, landing near Bernay-Res-sur-Mer, faced perhaps the most intense resistance of all. Cut down by crossfire from hidden bunkers, the survivors clawed forward through smoke and sand, throwing grenades into firing ports and silencing guns one by one. By 9:00 a.m., the 1st Canadian troops had breached the sea wall, storming the German defenses with rifles and bayonets. Meanwhile, engineers and tank crews struggled to create exits off the beach. The seawall was too steep, the roads blocked, and the incoming tide threatened to trap vehicles on the sand. But Canadian determination proved stronger than the obstacles. By mid-morning, the tide of battle turned. Reinforcements poured ashore, and the defenders began to crumble. One by one, the coastal villages fell. Courcelles, Bernay-Res, and Saint-Aubin were all cleared by late morning. By noon, the Canadians were pushing inland, advancing farther than any other Allied force that day. The North Shore Regiment captured the town of Taylorville, while armored columns raced toward the Carpiquet Airfield and the Caen Carpiquet Highway. But as daylight faded, the Canadians received new orders to halt and dig in for the night. They had secured the beach, but not without sacrifice. Over 1,000 men were killed or wounded at Juno, one of the highest tolls of D-Day. Yet their bravery ensured a solid Allied foothold in Normandy and proved that Canada's army could stand shoulder to shoulder with the best in the world. In the hours before the main invasion fleet appeared on the horizon, a quieter, but equally daring operation unfolded under the cover of darkness. It was the work of the Airborne Divisions, the silent soldiers who dropped behind enemy lines to prepare the way for the seaborne assault. These men were the first to touch French soil on D-Day, and their mission was one of confusion, courage, and chaos. Shortly before midnight on June 5, 1944, more than 2,000 aircraft roared through the night sky over the English Channel. Inside the planes, paratroopers from the American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions gripped their rifles, their faces streaked with black camouflage. The plan was to drop them across the Cotentin Peninsula, behind Utah Beach, to secure causeways, bridges, and key road junctions. Their success would determine whether the seaborne troops could move off the beaches once they landed. But as the aircraft crossed into Normandy, the weather turned against them. Thick clouds and fierce anti-aircraft fire scattered the formations. Many jumpers missed their designated drop zones by miles, some landing in flooded fields, others directly in the hands of German defenders. Chaos reigned. Units were shattered before they ever assembled. Yet, through grit and instinct, small bands of men gathered, identified landmarks, and moved toward their objectives. Near Saint-Aimé-Ries, paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne captured the town in fierce street fighting, making it the first French town liberated on D-Day. To the west, the 101st Airborne secured causeways leading from Utah Beach, eliminating German artillery positions that threatened the landing force. These fragmented, improvised victories proved essential. Meanwhile, on the eastern flank, the British 6th Airborne Division descended near the Caen Canal and the River Orne. Their objective seized two bridges critical to securing the invasion's left flank. In a daring glider assault, Major John Howard's men captured Pegasus Bridge within minutes, an operation so swift the Germans initially thought it a false alarm. Farther east, Another group stormed the Merville Battery, a heavily fortified position overlooking Sword Beach. Though suffering heavy losses, they succeeded in silencing the guns just before dawn. By sunrise, the scattered airborne troops had achieved the impossible. Despite misdrops, confusion, and devastating losses, they held the bridges, blocked German reinforcements, and disrupted communications. Their actions in those tense pre-dawn hours ensured that when the sun rose over Normandy, the beaches would not face the full fury of the German counterattack. As the Allies prepared to storm the beaches of Normandy, they faced a formidable opponent: the German defenses of the Atlantic Wall. Years of occupation had given the Nazis time to transform the coastline into a deadly fortress. What awaited the invaders was not a single line of defense, but a labyrinth of steel, concrete, and firepower designed to repel any attempt to land. From the Danish coast to the Spanish border, Hitler's engineers had built over 15,000 bunkers, gun emplacements, and fortifications. Normandy was no exception. General Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, had been tasked with strengthening France's northern coast. He believed the key to victory lay in stopping the Allies on the beaches themselves, before they could bring their superior numbers to bear. Under his orders, the coastline was transformed into a killing field. On the beaches, the first lines of defense were mechanical. Hundreds of thousands of mines buried in the sand, steel, hedgehogs, to block tanks, and wooden stakes tipped with explosives to destroy landing craft. Beyond them, barbed wire entanglements stretched for miles. Further inland, machine gun nests and pillboxes formed interlocking fields of fire, ensuring no soldier could cross the open sand without being exposed. Artillery positions, often hidden in concrete casemates, overlooked every likely landing point. Each of the main beaches faced a different network of defenses. Utah, though relatively weaker, was still laced with obstacles and mines. Omaha was the most fearsome of all. Overlooked by steep bluffs studded with bunkers and gun pits, many disguised by camouflage. The Germans here, from the battle-hardened 357th Infantry Division, were veterans of the Eastern Front, well-trained and determined. At Gold, Juno, and Sword, the British and Canadian troops would have to push through similar fortifications, defended by the 716th Infantry Division and reinforced by powerful coastal batteries. Behind the front line, Rommel had positioned armored divisions as a reserve force, including the 21st Panzer near Caen and the elite 12th SS Panzer Hitlerjugend Division. These were meant to counterattack once the Allies landed. But a critical flaw existed in their deployment. Hitler himself retained direct control over the release of these units. When the invasion began, he was asleep, and no one dared wake him. This delay would prove fatal. By the time the German armor finally moved, the Allies had already secured their foothold. The Atlantic Wall, once believed to be impregnable, was beginning to crack under the weight of the largest invasion in history. By the night of June 6, 1944, the outcome of D-Day had begun to take shape. Across the Normandy coastline, 5 battered beaches stood as the first steps in the liberation of Western Europe. The invasion had not gone according to plan. Confusion, misdrops, and brutal resistance had marked every hour. Yet by nightfall, the Allies had achieved the impossible. They were ashore, dug in, and holding the line. In the American sectors, Utah Beach was a triumph of coordination and luck. Despite being pushed nearly 2 kilometers off course, the 4th Infantry Division faced lighter defenses than expected. By linking with the 101st Airborne inland, they secured a strong foothold at minimal cost. Pointe du Hoc, assaulted by the 2nd Rangers, stood as a symbol of raw determination. Scaling sheer cliffs under fire, the Rangers destroyed German guns meant to devastate the landings. But Omaha Beach, codenamed Bloody Omaha, was a different story. Nearly everything went wrong: failed bombardments, sunken tanks, and relentless German fire. Entire companies were wiped out before reaching cover. Yet through courage and persistence, small groups broke through, flanking the defenses and capturing the bluffs. By the end of the day, Omaha was theirs, but at the cost of over 4,000 casualties. Further east, British and Canadian forces had also secured their ground. The British 3rd and 58th Divisions pushed inland from Sword and Gold Beaches, linking their beachheads and capturing key villages. Though their ultimate prize, the city of Caen, remained out of reach. The Canadians at Juno Beach, despite suffering some of the heaviest losses of the day, advanced farther than any other Allied force, reaching deep into the French countryside before being ordered to halt and consolidate their position. For the Germans, the day was one of shock and disarray. The Atlantic Wall had been breached, and despite local successes, the defenders were overwhelmed. Miscommunication delayed counterattacks, and the absence of decisive leadership crippled their response. Rommel's warnings about an Allied invasion had been proven right, but it was too late to stop it. By the morning of June 7th, over 156,000 Allied troops were on French soil. The beachheads were linked by makeshift supply lines, and the first waves of tanks, trucks, and artillery were rolling inland. The cost had been staggering, but D-Day was a success. A victory carved from chaos that opened the door to the liberation of Europe. When the guns finally fell silent over Normandy, the true weight of what had been achieved began to sink in. D-Day was not just a victory of arms. It was a victory of human spirit. Operation Overlord marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany, but it came at a staggering cost. More than 400 Allied soldiers were killed on June 6 alone, and tens of thousands more wounded or missing. Yet those sacrifices forged the bridgehead from which Europe would be freed. In the weeks that followed, the beachheads at Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword merged into a single, expanding front. Supply ships poured men, tanks, and equipment onto the beaches day and night, transforming them into vast logistical hubs. The Normandy countryside, the infamous Bocage, became the new battlefield, where every hedgerow hid an ambush and every village was fought for house by house. The Germans, though reeling from the invasion, fought with desperation. Elite panzer divisions counterattacked repeatedly, determined to drive the Allies back into the sea. But they could not match the relentless flow of reinforcements crossing from England. Within weeks, over 1 million Allied troops stood on French soil. By late July, the breakout from Normandy began with Operation Cobra, and soon after, the road to Paris lay open. The liberation of France and the defeat of the Third Reich had begun on those narrow beaches, under fire, amid chaos and courage. D-Day was not only a turning point in World War II, it was a defining moment in modern history, a reminder that freedom often demands the highest price. The success of June 6, 1944, was built not just on strategy or firepower, but on the bravery of ordinary men who faced extraordinary odds and refused to give in. Their legacy endures. In the quiet cemeteries overlooking the cliffs of Normandy, in the rusting remnants of landing craft beneath the waves, and in the peace that followed their victory. If you were moved by this story of sacrifice and determination, take a moment to reflect on their courage. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and let others know that their memory still matters. Like, subscribe, and help keep history alive. Because some stories deserve never to be forgotten.